Welcome to episode 6. As I said a while back, I'm way out in left field, and I'm on Team Jesus. This numbered series in a playlist here is mostly a straightforward, no-fluff documenting and describing the facts of certain puzzle pieces. I also put out other info on my channel, so be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. I've gone over most things in this playlist earlier this year on my channel. Even though I've got a lot of information that is all tied together into one gigantic picture, I'm trying to present a few things here in a more focused fashion, as well as simply pinpointing some definite dates for people that they can do with what they will on their own timelines. Much like the Revelation 12 sign gives us a date to work off of, I'm showing the Revelation 7 and 15 signs on my channel here, if it helps people. I know they are absolutely crucial to my own timeline. Today I'll mostly be covering half of Revelation chapter 14 and through chapter 15. John spent 15 verses on the Revelation 15 sign, going through the 40 days of the whole affair, which happened earlier this year in 2024. There's one thing that is actually totally connected to the Revelation 15 sign that I haven't even talked about on my channel yet. But in order to get focused here, I promise I will talk all about it in my next video. And it should be a super short video about John the Baptist and also Jesus in the temple when he was 12, and a few other miscellaneous things to show you. The screenshots here are the Revelation 15 sign and the events surrounding that sign. Of course, many times I've noted that this formation, just the same as with the Revelation 12 sign, could not be seen with the naked eye, because the sun puts a veil over our eyes, so that we cannot see the heavens in the light of the sun. Just the same as you will not see the heavens staring into the clouds during the day. It is what the smoke and the clouds are all about. It obscures your vision. This particular sign is so totally impossible. God's menorah of his 7 great luminaries, plus the fact that 6 of these luminaries crossed the line of Aquarius, getting their vials filled during the 40 days leading up to the 3rd Great American Eclipse that made the Aleph and Tav marks across the entire U.S. But when you count vial number 1, Jupiter, it actually took a total of exactly 777 days to fill the 7 vials of wrath. And what's even more unbelievable is that this menorah sign was also on the 313 date on both our Gregorian calendar and the Hebrew calendar, because it was also the 3rd day of the 13th month. Exactly the same as the Revelation 7 sign, which happened exactly 8 years and 8 chapters prior. In my last video, I showed how impossible the Revelation 7 sign was, and showed a spreadsheet of it all. I'll do the same in this video with the Revelation 15 sign. In a sense, this menorah is a temple dedication ceremony, much like the foot washing that only John tells us about after the Last Supper. I'll just show this one screenshot that will be part of my next video, but this is John the Baptist's circumcision day, the day he was presented at the temple to be named and circumcised. As you can see, Venus, the church, is getting quite a baptism here. Both of these dates are 321 on Stellarium, and both set to the same timestamp over Jerusalem, which I've set it to 1611, which is just after 4 in the afternoon. 1611 is the publication year of the KJV. So I found it very telling that on the day John the Baptist was named, Venus was diving into the waters of Aquarius. And on both these dates, Venus would be crossing the line within 24 hours. The orbit of Venus is 225 days, so the odds of Venus, the bride or church, being in the exact same spots, diving into the waters of Aquarius, and on the very day that John called the baptizer was named, and on the same date during the Revelation 15 sign, over 2,000 years apart, are pretty extreme odds. What more fireworks could God put in the heavens than he has been lately? No one could ever find such a thing as all these things combined. All 3 eclipses over the U.S. The blood moons eclipsing Uranus beneath the feet of Aries, 84 years apart. And what was to follow exactly 333 days later, both times, as well as the fact that the famous Night of Broken Glass that started the Holocaust happened on the 313th day of the year, within 24 hours of Anna's blood moon. And thanks to the Ecra Symphony channel for pointing that one out to me. I should have known that the number 313 would be right there in the mix. And these 2 impossible signs occurring on the exact same dates, 8 years apart and 8 chapters apart, and these 6 planets all going through the waters of Aquarius during the 40 days of Noah's flood of troubles, and in the middle of it all, creating the menorah formation, dedicating our new temple, stretching across Aquarius and Pisces as we end the age of Pisces and enter the new age of Aquarius. All these signs have never happened in the history of the world. And what's more, John wrote about these things 2,000 years ago. He spelled it all out. Even Jesus stooping down for the second time to make his mark of judgment on the ground in John's Gospel, on what appears to me to be the Sabbath after the great 8th day of Tabernacles in his Gospel. And that's exactly when the wedding ring eclipse happened, when God stooped down and made his second mark that went right across all of the Americas, which is 1/3 of the landmass of the planet. And in verse 8:8 no less, which everyone is pointing out that eclipse was 88 days from the 111, which is the center point of the eclipse cycles. The 2 biggest signs that John wrote about, 8 years and 8 chapters apart, on the exact same date, marking John the Baptist's birth date, and verse 8:8 for the wedding ring eclipse, marking the day Jesus was first presented at the temple and named and circumcised. John writes in the first verse of Revelation chapter 15, "And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God." And he tells us in verse 7 that one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials full of the wrath of God. So right there, John gives us the 777. Verse 7, 7 angels, 7 vials. I've already talked a lot about the 4 beasts that John saw in heaven, but obviously it's the one with the face as a man, Aquarius with the waters to fill the 7 vials. In verse 6, John also talks about these 7 angels coming out of the temple, clothed in pure and white linen, and having their breasts girded with golden girdles. And as all of God's luminaries passed through the waters of Aquarius, they were all clothed in the sun, because the sun was right there with them. Even when Jupiter passed over, back on 2/22/22. And as I'm sure many already know, in verse 8 of chapter 15, John clearly writes that no man was able to enter into the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled. And I've pointed out many times that the first time in John's narrative that we find the red letters when Jesus comes as a thief is at vial number 6 in chapter 16. To me, it looks like the rapture could happen at vial number 6, and I'm living in chapter 16 right now. So, as I was saying, John spent 15 verses for the Revelation 15 sign, which actually covers the 40 days surrounding that sign, which I've always called Noah's flood of troubles on my timeline. Even before God showed me this sign in the heavens, that's what I was calling the 40 days leading up to the 3rd and final eclipse. So, chapter 15 is 8 verses, and just before that, we have the last 7 verses of chapter 14, which leads us directly to the menorah sign, which is the first verse of chapter 15. The last 7 verses of chapter 14 talk about the first 4 angels that John saw coming out of the temple. And that's exactly what led to the menorah formation. The formation happened after 4 planets had passed through the waters of Aquarius. And John describes these in order. In verse 14:14, John does not actually state that he saw this first angel coming out of the temple, like he states about the following 3 angels. This is because Jupiter, the first angel, did not pass through the waters of Aquarius within the 40-day span that all the others did. From start to finish, it took 777 days to fill the 7 vials of wrath. Perhaps that's why John started this chapter and a half of this formation in verse 14:14, which can easily be seen as the 7777, the 777 days for the 7 to cross over. Why didn't he just spell out the whole thing in chapter 15? It's because John uses verse numbers, and he also wanted to clearly point out that both of those impossible signs that he saw in the heavens were exactly 8 chapters and 8 years apart. I've heard many say that verse 14:14 is about Jesus. But when John speaks about Jesus in the book of Revelation, he is clear that he is talking about Jesus. But that's not what he says here. He writes that one sat like unto the Son of Man. He is not going to say that Jesus is like the Son of Man. He is clearly talking about Jupiter, our king planet, that most people believe is symbolic of the earthly Christ, being striped and pierced, like unto the Son of Man, and not is the Son of Man. Jupiter, the king planet, represents the earthly Christ, while our sun represents the heavenly Christ as the light of the world. Those are the 2 that John sees with sharp sickles. Mercury and the moon are both seen here as sort of messengers, crying out that it is time for the great harvest to begin. So after John sees those four come out of the temple, we have the first verse of chapter 15, which is the menorah formation of 3:13-2024. And I can already hear it. People saying that by the end of chapter 14, the harvest has already begun. And yes, it has. I've pointed out before that the vine and the grapes represent Israel and Judah, and they are definitely being thrown into the winepress of God's wrath right now. Jupiter crossed the line of Aquarius back in 2022, and we can look at all the pics in a moment, but Jupiter is a very slow-moving planet, and by the time the menorah formation happened, he had made his way over to that front foot of Aries to stand exactly where the sun was standing during the crucifixion. So God made sure that Jupiter was taking his proper and exact position for the menorah formation. Only God could do this, people. This formation of God's menorah of the seven, with the sun standing front and center to light them all, and dedicating the new temple, and signaling the end of one age and the beginning of another while the age is ending. And it is happening in the constellations of those ages. This is not something that has ever happened since the beginning of time. So I'll just go through the pictures real quick and then show you what my spreadsheet looks like for all this. Since this is about war, the menorah formation itself was in perfect position at the 0 hour from the location of Hiroshima. So I've taken these shots of Jupiter crossing the line from the location of Pearl Harbor to start things off, and beginning our 777 day count to the third and final Great American Eclipse, when the seventh vial is filled, and on John the Baptist's current birth date, star date too, perhaps signaling the world's soon baptism by fire. On 2/22/22, I've taken a capture of Jupiter beginning to cross the line of the waters of Aquarius at 1 second to midnight. By the morning of 2/24/22, Jupiter had crossed the line, and so had Putin on 2/24/22. It was the largest attack on a European country since World War II. Since all of this also has to do with John's final chapter, I've decided to move my stellarium location to the Sea of Tiberias and look at what's happening until we get to the eclipse. My previous slides were simply taken from my own location, so of course Israel is a different time zone from where I'm at. On March 1st, the day after Leap Day, the day I was leaping up and down about at the end of last year, we see Mercury, vial number 2, squarely on the line at exactly sundown. Shortly after that, at about an hour after midnight, starting March 2nd, we see the sun number 3 squarely on the line and crossing over the waters. On March 10th, in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m., we find the dark moon number 4 squarely on the line and crossing over. So that's the first 4 vials to be filled, and the end of chapter 14. Then the menorah formation happened on 3:13, which is the first verse of chapter 15. Then on 3:22, we have Venus number 5 crossing the line at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll hear me talking about Venus diving into the waters on 3/21, the day after the equinox, which is true. The next day on 3/22 is when Venus actually crossed over. As you can see, Saturn number 6 has been in the waters for a while, but Saturn is actually squarely on the line on 3/31, shortly before midnight when looking from this Tiberius location. Finally, we have Vial number 7, and for this one, I've moved my location to Eagle Pass in Texas, where the final eclipse first entered the U.S. And I've set my timestamp to the exact minute of maximum eclipse at Eagle Pass. And as you can see, Mars is squarely on the line, the final vial to get filled with the wrath of God. So I made a spreadsheet here of all the times since the year 2012 that a planet has actually crossed the line of the waters of Aquarius, and going to the end of 2024 this year. I left the moon out of it because it crosses the line every month. All these exact dates could differ slightly because of time zones too. And I've also added Neptune here, even though Neptune is not one of the 7 luminaries that we see with the naked eye in the heavens. But I wanted to see just what was going on here. What I find really amazing is that Neptune is only going to go through the waters of Aquarius about every 165 years. And as you can see, it did a little dance through the waters back in 2017, and even went retrograde, so it actually passed through 3 times during a 10-month time span. Neptune only comes around every 165 years, and of all years, it was 2017, when I feel that our final countdown began. And the first time Neptune crossed the line was at the spring equinox of all days. The second time Neptune crossed the line, since 165 years ago, was 7 days before the Revelation 12 sign too, on 9/16. What's amazing is that it was also the exact same day before the Revelation 12 sign when Mercury and Mars were in exact conjunction. I'll talk more about it if I can get around to the Revelation 12 sign video. But look at these screen captures for exactly 7 days before the Revelation 12 sign. This is a wide view from Jerusalem, showing that just before sundown at 6:30 in the evening, the sun is setting in the west, and Neptune is rising in the east. These are side-by-side super close-ups of that moment at 6:30 in the evening. You can see that Neptune is clearly on the line of the waters of Aquarius, and in the west, Mercury the messenger and Mars the god of war are in near exact conjunction, exactly 7 days before the Revelation 12 sign, and exactly 4 days before they sounded the trumpets for Rosh Hashanah, which called an end to the year 5777 for the Jews. If I have time, I'll make a video going in depth with the Revelation 12 sign and that whole story too. Also on my spreadsheet here, look at Jupiter. Since Jupiter's orbit is 12 years, it only appears once here, and Jupiter only crossed over on 2/22/22. And as soon as he totally crossed the line, Putin crossed the line into Ukraine, and the war started. What are the odds of that? Jupiter will not be back around again until 2034. And because of slowpoke Jupiter, It took exactly 777 days to fill all 7 vials. And just to remind you again, look at these side-by-side screenshots. When Jupiter only circles around every 12 years, but on the very day of God's grand menorah of the Revelation 15 sign, Jupiter is perfectly placed right at the front foot of Aries, exactly where the sun was on Crucifixion Day. Some will say that Jesus was actually put into the tomb a day earlier on April 5th of 30 AD, and not April 6th. That's fine. The sun does not travel that much in 24 hours on God's clock. So maybe the screenshot on the left that I'm showing is actually Passover Day. But just look where Jupiter was standing in his place for God's grand menorah, in that very spot. And you may also have seen here that I've shown before. Look where Jupiter was in the left-hand screen capture here during the crucifixion or Passover Day of 30 AD. Jupiter was sitting exactly on that band of Pisces that day, in the same exact spot as where the final great American eclipse happened. And if you've watched my videos, then you would know that this spot on the band of Pisces is also where the sun was exactly sitting on 313.3 BC, the day that John the Baptist was born, which means that the current star date of John the Baptist's birthday would be April 8th, the final eclipse. It's the same star date. And Saturn only circling around every 30 years. He has not passed this way since 1995. And won't be around again until 2053. And yet here he is, absolutely perfectly on time, for the big lineup in God's grand menorah. And what's even more outlandish is that Saturn is about to go retrograde. So he will be exactly crossing the line of Aquarius during the next solar eclipse on October 2nd. There will only be 2 eclipses this year. The first was the last day of the Jewish religious year, and the next solar eclipse will be on the last day of the Jewish civil year, October 2nd. And there will be Saturn exactly crossing the line of Aquarius that very day during the eclipse, only passing this way every 30 years. Oh, and then Saturn will turn right around and be crossing the line of the waters of Aquarius again on Christmas Eve of 2024. And all of these luminaries that created God's grand menorah for our new temple dedication, well, 6 of them, minus Slowpoke Jupiter, crossed the line all within 40 days. The days of Noah's flood of troubles, leading up to the final eclipse, with Mars crossing the line exactly during the eclipse. You just can't make this stuff up, people. In the next super short video, I'll be talking more about those living waters and the man we only know as John the Baptizer. I'll try to do it quick before they cut off my internet. All I can really hope for at this point is a spectacular rapture. Signing off from way out in left field.